welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us here tonight at the town of Brighton's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander celebration. This is a month that is so in keeping with the diversity of the town of Brighton, because the AAPI community itself is so very diverse and brings so much to the fabric of our town. Just in the last month, I have attended events with the Nepali community, the Indian community at the India Community Center, the Islamic Center, the Afghan community, all parts of what is an extraordinary Asian American Pacific Islander community here in Brighton and in the greater Rochester area. So tonight we have the opportunity to hear 4 leaders in that community, and I know it's going to be a valuable, thought-provoking discussion. But I do first, I want to acknowledge elected officials who are here. Councilmember Robin Wilt is here. Thank you, Robin. Robin, like myself, is juggling another event tonight, so if you see either one, well, I'm hard to miss, I get it. But if at some point during the evening you look around and we're not here, it's not that this event isn't important, but we're also sharing the evening with the wonderful people next door in the Brighton Memorial Library. So we also have, and he will be more fully introduced in just a moment, but Town Justice Vic Vilcu is here, and he will be part of our panel. Thank you, Vic. My program says that Senator Jeremy Cooney.
He's on his way from Albany, 20 minutes away.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I know we have, and I'm not going to vamp for time for 20 minutes, so because we have some people who will really give us a much better show than I can give as our dancers. But I really do appreciate your being here tonight, and I want to now just spend a moment talking about the group that's really responsible for us being here, our IDEA Board, our Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board. We have made a long-standing commitment here in Brighton to diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, because it is who we are as a community. If you look out your front window of Town Hall, as I do every day, you see the diversity that makes Brighton extraordinary. Whether it's faith communities, LGBTQ communities, people of different races, people of different abilities, we live together as one family in Brighton. And because of that, because that is so much a part of who we are, we celebrate the many colors, the many facets that make Brighton such a diverse community, and a community that people want to live in because of that diversity. And that's something we're committed to and we are going to continue to support. One of the ways we support it, as I mentioned, is our IDEA Board. Amy Shee, who will be our moderator tonight, is a member of the IDEA Board. Councilmember Wilt is the town board liaison to that committee. Do we have any? Oh, yes, we do. Please, just stand up, if we could all stand up, all of our IDEA Board members, please. Beautiful. Thank you all. And one of the people that stood up in the very back, Miriam Moore. Miriam is the glue that keeps all of this. I don't want to mix my metaphors here, because you also just keep it all running. I don't want to suggest that but you are really the glue that brings so much of the work that we do together. Miriam Moore, our Chief Diversity Officer. So with that, if our dancers are ready, because I'm going to have to skip over for now Senator Cooney, we have dancers from the ABCD Dance Company. What is the ABCD Dance Company, you ask? Anybody can dance. I think they've heard it before. So I am really excited. This is going to be fun. If you've ever seen a Bollywood movie, you know what I'm talking about. So it's my pleasure to introduce the ABCD Dance Company.
आज इस मैदान में रंग
That was just fantastic. Let's give those great dancers another round of applause. Dewanshi Patel, who is the instructor for the group, what a great group of students you have. You know, community events, cultural events like these really are special when we get to see the cultural activities, the dance, the art, the music. So your performances tonight make tonight special. Thank you very much. Okay, we will now though, much as I'd enjoy seeing him dance all night, but we do have a panel discussion, and I think that's also going to be something to be looking forward to tonight. First, I did introduce Judge Vic Vilkew. Judge Vilkew is an attorney in Rochester. He practices, he attended Emory University, Case Western Law School, and this past year was elected Brighton Town Justice, the first Indian trial judge in upstate New York and the first Sikh judge in New York State. I know you're going to enjoy, many of you know Vic or met Vic during his campaign. Our first panelist, Judge Vic Vilkew. As I was just saying, Dr. Christina Lee and I seem to be in the same room a lot these days, and that is, for me, that's a good thing. Christina Lee is such a force in this community, a quiet force maybe, but a force nonetheless. Vice President of the Brighton Board of Education, Global Education Coordinator at MCC. I know we're going to learn a lot tonight from Christina Lee. Christina, thank you so much for being a part of this. And finally, Dr. Prabhu David, whom I met, 10 days ago, you know? But the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at RIT. With everything going on in our colleges and universities today, I know his presence here is important. Our colleges and universities are so important to the Rochester area, specifically to Brighton. Of course, those of you that know me will know that we also bonded a little bit that evening we met over our shared time in the great state of Michigan. So, Dr. Prabhu David, thank you. And finally, our moderator tonight, again, a member of the IDEA board, Amy Shee. Amy, thank you so much. And I'll turn that over to you.
Do you need these?
No, do you need, what do you need? You need mine?
Yeah.
Just mine?
Well, I think it's two. You have a copy.
No.
Oh,
he doesn't
I
have a
don't,
copy.
but
You didn't get a
you can
copy?
ask it.
You know the answer.
I'm gonna,
I have yours.
okay.
Yours. Oh, no. I lied. You have them all? I'm sorry. I figured. Sorry. Sorry. There's like two of them. I don't have an advanced degree like these people, so like, you know, I'm a little bit slow. So the format of this evening is there's going to be 3 questions for each of the panelists, and I'll go in order, and each of them have 2 questions that are just for them, and then a final question that will be directed at all of them. So my first question is for Dr. David. The 2017 book, The Other 1%, Indians in America, focused on 3 major issues. One, which is assimilation, the multiple pathways and challenges of becoming American while maintaining some aspects of their distinct identities while shedding others. What are some of the challenges faced by South Asians or Indians who are preparing themselves to be new Americans?
Thank you, first of all. Thank you all for joining us today. It's really a treat to be here, and thank you, Amy. I looked at the book, and I have to say I just read the synopsis, and I didn't get a chance to go through all of it. But the assimilation question, in my mind, is there are two models that I've encountered in the past or read about. One is the melting pot metaphor, and the other is the salad bowl metaphor. I think there's something to be said about both ways of thinking about assimilation. One is a sort of a forged identity that we take on when we are here in the US. And the other is, as part of that forged identity, we don't lose what is uniquely ours. People from different cultures, from other countries, they come here, they're part of the bigger fabric of the American experience, yet they maintain or retain aspects of their own culture, which is critical. I've seen this, and I think this is a strength. This is one of America's really unique strengths in trying to create a melting pot, yet at the same time allowing room for people to keep their identities. Some of the challenges, right? I thought instead of going very deep into challenges, I thought I'll just leave you with one observation. When I came, and my generation, when we came to the US, we came as graduate students. Almost all of us. The story was the same thing, 2 suitcases and you land at JFK and you have no idea LaGuardia, you can't get there in 15 minutes. So this is before the internet. No one has an idea that what is involved about life in the US. And people come, they have an assistantship, and that's all they have. And they work their way through, and they experience some of the sting of living with less. Although you're a graduate student, you have very little high risk and high stakes. But these days, many of the Indian immigrants come in with a job. For example, my brother, who came 8 years after me, by then he came during Y2K as a developer. So when he landed, of course, he didn't have very much money, but he had a job. So the same kind of journey that some of the others went, it's changing rapidly. That leads me to one key insight, which is about not understanding or paying sufficient attention as part of this assimilation journey about America's history and the past. And also the poverty and the lack of so many services that people have. The first story I did was in Athens, Ohio. I was a freelance journalist. I was covering this trial in court, and a dad was accused of some really, really bad behavior. And I'm sitting there, I was shocked. I thought, this is America. People have own houses, they drive beautiful cars. And then this happens, but it happens everywhere. And the understanding, and also I was so struck that there was poverty in America. But it is true, there are people who, it is very much a reality. So that kind of sensibility, I think, is important for us to appreciate and inculcate in new immigrants as well. So that's sort of my journey.
Thank you, Dr. David. Dr. Lee, the next question is for you. Marilyn Strickland represents Washington's 10th congressional district, and in 2021 became one of 3 new members of the U.S. House of Representatives who are women and of Korean descent. Within her first 200 days, Strickland made a name for herself, as she was an early co-sponsor of the Anti-Asian Hate Crimes Bill, which had bipartisan support in both chambers. During the ceremony in which Representative Strickland was being sworn in, she proudly wore a hanbok, ceremonial Korean attire, reportedly the first to be worn on the House floor. Talk to us about your role as a first. Are there unspoken expectations as you are setting the tone as the first Asian American and person of color to be elected to the Brighton School Board of Education?
Okay. Hello. I guess I'm going to speak a little bit from my lived experience and also, I don't know, I'll tell you a little bit of my personal accounts. last week when I was here, was it just last week? I did not recognize my parents, who are also firsts in many ways, because my parents immigrated here to Brighton over 50 years ago with their suitcases, their 2 children, not a lot of money, but a job. And in many ways, as early Korean Americans to this Rochester area, there was not a lot of infrastructure to support Asian Americans. And so really, when I think about how they landed in this community, it's not New York City. They had to find other Korean Americans to support each other. And so we grew up with a very tight-knit group of families here in Rochester, not very many, and I'm actually still quite close to many of the Korean Americans who graduated from, a very few from Brighton, just me and my sister and a few others, but lots from Pittsford, Mendon, and in other parts of Rochester. You know, I think about their journey, and I never intended to be the first of anything, really. Although in high school, I did have an idea that I was one of very few Asian Americans in high school. So even being involved in student council in high school, I knew that it was unusual maybe to see, and this is part of the second question, which I'll come to later, but being an Asian American woman, a Korean American woman, a young girl in high school, it didn't seem like student council was the path that people might have seen for me. So in some ways, when I ran for the school board, I wasn't intending to do it as a first, but there was a call to action in this community that we needed more representation on our school board, in our community in general, and I, as a longtime Brighton resident, I did want to take on that role. So the question is, are there unspoken expectations? Maybe, yes. I try to be really cognizant of what the community expectations are, and also where I can push in terms of the school district. I feel because my background is actually in anthropology and I do a lot of work in diversity, equity, and inclusion since graduate school, I felt like my voice could elevate things at the school that perhaps had not been part of the conversation before. And so in that way, I did want that role. Like I thought, okay, I have a different lived experience. I have a different background in terms of the work that we do. And so I did want to have that role. But I don't know if I'm answering this correctly. I also feel a lot of responsibility to the community. So I'm always listening and always trying to learn and trying to find a way to sort of marry the expectations people might have of me, both in the role as a board member and also as a role to push a little bit on issues that might not have been elevated in the past. Does that answer?
Thank you. I just want to say, as a parent of students at the Brighton School District, I think we parents do put a lot of pressure on Christina to deliver for us because she is the first, and we're like, finally. And so I think she has a lot of masters to try to serve. So thank you, and sorry.
No problem, Amy.
The next question is for Judge Vilku. In 1917, the U.S. government enacts the Immigration Act fueled by rising anti-Asian racism. This act banned Indians and other Asians hailing from what was known as the Asiatic Barred Zone. These immigration laws did in fact stymie the burgeoning Indian American population. As a nation, where would you say we are in our efforts to ensure that those seeking to be new Americans, particularly those of Asian descent, are well positioned to become thriving citizens?
A really easy question. First, I wanted to thank the IDEA Board as well for inviting us here in the town of Brighton, and of course the well-known Miriam Moore, who really brings our community together time and time again. When Bill introduced me to Miriam, I was just really blown away by her commitment to promoting not just in words, but in action, diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything this town does. And I think if you're a member of this town, you can attest to the fact that Miriam has been quite successful in that regard. So this is a tough question. And I think where I want to start with that question is to say that, you know, the root of the Asian American experience as it is in this country, I think it is inextricably linked to the African American experience in this country. And, you know, the Asian Americans and immigrants of all stripes, I think, owe a debt of gratitude to the African Americans in our country and our community who have really led the cause with which and opened the doors by which many in our community have been able to walk in. It hasn't been easy, even when those doors open, but I think that link is really important. And that link, I think, speaks to the fact that, you know, the experience of new Asian Americans is the experience of many new immigrants to this country, but really it's also the experience of any American in this country. If we can help Asian Americans develop and prosper in our country, we can help all Americans develop and prosper in our country. So it's a really important question. You know, the fact that we're talking about Asian Americans, obviously during Asian American AAPI month, I think it's important to, again, connect it to the larger picture. You know, a vignette that I think really describes how we are all connected in this struggle is really a story of a young preacher in Georgia reading the writings of a 105-pound Indian man whose only possessions were a robe, prayer beads, and a walking stick, and being inspired by that message. And it's that cross-cultural connection that I think makes our country stronger. It makes each other stronger. I can recall reading remarks by Dr. King when he visited India, the land of Gandhiji, and he said, I come to India not as a tourist, but as a pilgrim. And I think that speaks volumes about how Dr. King viewed India and the teachings from that country that really inspired his movement here in our country. And we, in turn, then, as Asian Americans, stood to benefit from. I think another anecdote that comes to mind when I see this question is 1917. You know, Asian Americans have been here right from the beginning, right? This isn't a new burgeoning population. We were there, whether it's the Chinese Americans in Chinatown, right? Or building the railroads out west. Or, you know, the story of Bhagat Singh Thind, a man who came to the United States fleeing British colonialism in the Pacific Northwest. He gets together with a bunch of other immigrants, Finns, Swedes, Chinese, and he learns that, look, you know, I too can be a citizen in this country. And he tries to. And of course, the Supreme Court says, not so fast. You know, you are not a white man. Only free white men can be citizens in this country. He says, well, wait a minute. I can get an expert that says that, you know, we are descended from people who are white. We are white. And so, of course, Supreme Court, as it did in the time, constantly moves the finish line and says that, well, you're not commonly accepted as white. But he doesn't stop. This is an Asian American who continued to press and press because he felt that he was truly an American and he deserved these inalienable rights. And he was jailed as a result of it, repeatedly jailed as a result of it, despite the fact that he served in World War I on behalf of the American forces. This is a veteran Indian American from the 1920s. It's not something talked about in our history books. So I just think it's important to recognize that Asian Americans have been here. We've continued to be here. We've continued to thrive, contribute to this community. We owe so much to the other groups that have come before us, and we're all interconnected in that way.
Thank you. Dr. David, the next question for you is, there's a wealth of data that purports college students of color face circumstances on college campuses that are starkly different than that of white students. As the Provost and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs at RIT, how do you shape your work in the higher education sector based on such?
That's a terrific question. I'm going to tee off Judge Vilku here. He talked about Dr. King. And in the letter from Birmingham jail, there is one line that struck me during George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests. I was looking at the speech, and one line really stood out, specifically for academics. And Dr. King says, you have to be a thermostat and not a thermometer. A thermostat and not a thermometer. I think the academy is brilliant at being a thermometer, looking at race, documenting the biases, talking about it, and analyzing it in a very thoughtful and well-intentioned way. But the action has been lacking. And there are very many reasons to it. There are structural reasons, there are individual reasons. But I was really struck by that. How can one be a thermostat in a sense, effecting change and not just observing or documenting bias? The story that stands out to me is Mario, and he's fine if I use his name. Mario was a student at Michigan State. He came from Detroit. He was part of the foster care system. And when he arrived at MSU, there's this group of students who can come a few weeks before the beginning of the semester for some preparatory training. Took the class, the counselor gave all these students a sticky note to jump as high as they could and place it on the wall. And then, of course, he gave them another sticky note and said, now jump higher and go a little bit more. And the students wondered why, and they did it, and they asked him what it was all about. And he said, if you are from Detroit and if you're an African American, you have to do more than everybody else here to succeed. Mario gave this amazing talk at the Breslin Center, which is this big basketball arena where Tom Izzo coaches. And when he sat down, or when he finished his talk, the stadium erupted, and the people on the dais, everyone on the stage, stood up and clapped. You would have thought that it was a three-pointer, that Michigan State beat Michigan or something. But the point was, what he said was so compelling that why should African American students and students of color work more to succeed? You could look at it as glass half full, that he has the wherewithal, the resilience to succeed. But why is a good question. Why? Why should he have to work more? And that is unfortunately the truth on many campuses. There is an opportunity gap of about 10 percentage points compared African American men graduation rate compared to the graduation rate of others. Now look at this. Students who come to the university take on loans. And if they don't graduate, that's a double whammy. I mean, even if you graduate and get a good job, you have to pay off your loans, and it takes a long time to do so, especially if you come from a family that doesn't have the means. But if you don't graduate, then how are you going to pay your loans back? So there is a moral imperative here to ensure that our students do well. And there are a number of ways to address this. There is, I see this as a question of, it could be social justice, but it doesn't have to be something so lofty. It could be something as simple as being decent and being caring. We have a responsibility. If you have more, you have to care for those who have less. I mean, that's just a fundamental ideal you find in every religion, every culture. There are three quick ways. I won't take very much time. One is pathway programs. You cannot just say you're going to change the profile of students and their success in college without creating pathway programs for students. So working with them from school, creating opportunities for them from middle school on, bringing them to campus and introducing them to the campus culture. That's one. The other is also when you think about the scholarships and experiences that we offer outside the classroom, raising money so these students can have the same experiences that some of the more affluent peers can. And then back to academics, additional training that we offer on campus geared toward our students with a lot of cultural sensitivity and bringing the right role models who can offer this kind of training is critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Lee, this one's a doozy. A 2018 study published by the American Psychological Association on Asian American women's experiences of discrimination noted two emerging themes. One, Asian American women are passive, quiet, and submissive and expected to be agreeable. And two, Asian American women are invisible and lack agency, voice, and power. As an Asian American woman who has successfully taken a seat at the table, how do we combat these discriminatory notions, shedding light on these professional and personal biases?
Okay. So recently I was asked to moderate a discussion on a PBS documentary on the 2021 killings of the Asian American women in Atlanta. And I realized as I was watching the documentary and preparing the discussion that because we were coming out of COVID and there was so much going on in our lives at the time, that I had not really processed that that violence had targeted Asian American women so outwardly. But the thing when I watched the documentary that really alarmed me is actually how people spoke about that violence afterwards. That the man who had committed the crime had had a bad day. That these women were probably some kind of sexual worker rather than owning businesses and being part of the business community in that area. I think Asian Americans are often invisible, and particularly Asian women. And you can see it if you sit in a meeting, oftentimes with many different people, and perhaps predominantly men, and there might be some women in the room. Women and Asian American women might say a very important statement, but sometimes it's not heard unless a man in that room says the same thing. And, I think the onus is not really on us as women to change that culture. I think it's really important for the systems at hand, for the dominant systems that create those kinds of discrimination to change themselves. I think for me, I try and elevate that perspective that, oh, did you hear that so-and-so just made that comment? Let's listen, like they had a very important point in that meeting. But sometimes it's really like, it really goes by people who can't see how systemic ideas of discrimination actually impact small spaces like, just regular office meetings sometimes. I also often say that Asian American communities are not a monolith. We're very diverse in countries of origin, in religion, linguistically, culturally, and also Asian American women are not monoliths also, right? So we come from many different backgrounds and have very different styles of leadership or diplomacy or grit or fighting power. And so when we have these narratives, such as this one, which I think we all feel, but perhaps we don't give enough attention to the women who are really outspoken and maybe the women who can be loud and impactful without seeming like they're not submissive. I don't know. I'll come back to I'll pass that on and then I can come back. I don't know if I didn't really answer a question here, but.
By the way, that is a secret. If you don't know the answer to the question, you answer your own question. That's what I'm going to be doing moving forward.
See you next then.
Yeah, look for it.
I think you answered the question, so that's okay. Judge Vilku, A recent study on gender and racial diversity from the American Constitution Society found that white males make up 58% of state court judges, despite them making up less than 1/3 of the population. This subject matter highlights the assertion that diversity within the court system underlies the need for broader perspectives that can aid in processing complex cases. As the first Indian American and person of color to serve as a judge in the town of Brighton, how do your lived experiences and lived realities shape your lens in this role?
So, look, the stats are pretty alarming. Asian Americans make up approximately 12 to 13% of the New York population. They make up a woeful 4% of the state's judiciary. Compare that to the statistic I'm seeing here of 58% of state court judges being white versus them being less than 1/3 of the population. I would also note that the vast majority of those 4.6% of the judiciary that are Asian American are not elected, they're appointed. And I think that's a valuable distinction to make as well, is that even when we do have representation, it's not one where you have somebody going door to door asking for votes. It's one where maybe a governor or somebody else appoints them to that position. As to Indian American judges, and something that I have a little bit of a perspective on, in the entire state of New York, we've elected approximately 4 Indian American judges. Elected 4 Indian American judges. Upstate New York, meaning the capital region and west, has elected 1. So we obviously have a lot of work to do. Those are pretty eye-opening numbers. And I guess the first question is, why? Why should we care? Why should that matter to anybody, whether you're Asian American or not? And from my perspective, I'm a firm believer that a diverse judiciary is critical in order to have judiciary function at its highest level. And I believe that having a diverse judiciary is a key factor in extracting the talent we have in our diverse and talented country. So let's talk about some immediate, I think, advantages of having a diverse judiciary. Since 2016, the FBI has reported that we've seen a spike in hate crimes in our country. And obviously those hate crimes have affected Jewish Americans, they've affected Asian Americans, and people in the LGBTQ+ community. And I think one of the critical advantages of having a judiciary that is diverse, and specifically Asian American, is that this is a community that knows intimately what it feels like to be a victim of hate crimes that are spiking throughout the country. I think also to have a broader perspective of the different cultural factors that may impact a person when they're testifying. My father, bless him, is a brilliant guy, but you put a microphone in front of him, he clams right up. He doesn't want to hear his voice, especially when it's broadcast to a courtroom. Some people, when they see that, they may think, well, he's being reticent, he's not willing to talk about what happened, or maybe he's being deceptive in some way. And I think if you have a broader perspective over the immigrant experience, the Asian American experience, you can appreciate that immigrants, first-generation immigrants in particular when they come to this country, really don't want to be noticed. They want to keep a low profile. They want to go to work. They want to come home. They want to go to work, come home, and stay below anyone's eyes. And I think if you have a diverse judiciary, diverse law enforcement, I think it makes for a safer community. I think also a diverse population deserves a diverse judiciary if we want a community to rely upon the decisions coming from that court. I think that a diverse court can issue decisions and can make draft orders that have more credibility because it comes from somebody that may look like them, may reflect their values, may reflect their community. And then not just the Asian American community, the broader community in general. that it isn't a person purely of, their advantage or their time in the country who is able to, rise to the level of being a judge or a prosecutor or whatever. I think it inspires confidence in the larger public to see a diverse judiciary, and as a result, produces a more stable society. And I think finally, I think about a diverse judiciary will inspire the next generation of leaders in our country, right? Whether it be Asian American or otherwise. I've oftentimes talked about the fact that I never thought somebody named Vikram Singh Bilku could be elected to anything in this country. But then, of course, the town of Brighton proved me wrong. But I was inspired by seeing a face that looked like mine, and Jeremy Cooney, State Senator Jeremy Cooney. And that is what I think diversity does, is that it inspires a new generation of leaders, whether it be Asian American, African American, wherever the case may be, to say, look, I see somebody that doesn't look like the rest of these people. And maybe that is an option for me as well. And our country has so many strengths, but one of them, I would argue to you, is that it is our diversity. It is our ability to have people from all different walks of life have the ability and the belief that they too can be leaders in the country, or leaders in academia, or leaders in technology. And as soon as we lose that, we lose a critical advantage that we have in this country. And I think that's why a diverse judiciary, diverse leaders are critically important.
Thank you. So the final question is for all three of you, and I can repeat it again when it's your turn. Aligning the final question with the 2024 AANHPI, because it's too long to say it all, Heritage Month theme, please expound on the relevancy of advancing leaders through innovation. Dr. David?
Thanks, Amy. I want to make a quick point about the previous two questions. I mentioned the importance of assimilation, maintaining one's identity at the same time being part of the American fabric and bringing something special. I think the Indian community has done that very well. You see in cultural centers, various places, and other Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, others also have done that in a very good way. The other one I said is a sensibility for American history and where we come from, the race relations and some of the darker side of American history to understand, because that shapes how we deal with others. One other thing that I forgot to mention was this is specifically for the Indian community, that not everyone is successful. Although it's just a 1% community, among that 1%, like any other community, there is a normal distribution. There are people who are extremely successful, all these millionaires and billionaires. Then there are folks who have not made it that way. And I think it's important for, especially coming from India, there is a very hard-edged definition to success. And it's very clear. If you ask any Indian, they can rattle off all the things that you need to check to be considered to be a success. And to soften that and to think about the people from our, from the same sort of cultural heritage or from the same country who do not have that kind of success, and to think about success slightly differently. On leadership through innovation, to me, innovation creates change. Change creates chaos, a lot of anxiety. One person I like to think about is Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft. He uses a very simple three-part leadership philosophy. He says, model, coach, and care. He says leadership comes down to modeling good behavior, coaching your team, and caring for your team. And it's particularly relevant because when he took over Microsoft, it was a toxic place. The question that you asked about women and others left behind in the corporation, it was a toxic place. But he turned Microsoft around. And it's a very big, massive organization. It's very difficult to turn it around. But he turned it around through the power of his own life example. And when we talk about modeling, it requires self-reflection. It goes back, to Socrates, and the unexamined life is not worth living. So to be a role model, we want leaders to be self-reflective and to genuinely model what they want others to emulate. The second thing in terms of coaching, if we live in a very different world, the idea of leadership, I think, going back to Vic's point, Obama, when he became president, I think it created a sort of a vision of leadership that is different from the past. You see someone who doesn't fit what you think a leader should be, right? I think it opened the door for, I would say even for myself to be here at RIT in this role, in a leadership role. It wouldn't happen because people would not see me as a leader. They may see me in different roles, but they see me that way because he was the one who sort of led the way. And to see if he can be president, you don't have to look a certain part. Anyone with the right skills can be in these leadership roles. So I think there is something to be said about that. The coaching part, both the Gen Xers, millennials, they have a different expectation from work. Work is no longer a place where they collect a paycheck. It is much more. It's a place where they forge their identity. It's an extension of their identity. They have to do things to shape society and make a difference. But also there is a longing for community at work. People no longer want work to be a place where you go and you come back. There is a big demand until recently with COVID and work from home, those things are still in flux. But before then, there was the strong expectation that work had to be a place of community. All of that leads me to believe that it's not just telling people what to do, but to maximize individual potential. And that's what a coach does. The coach may not be the best player, but knows how to get the best out of the team and bring all the players together toward a common cause. The last one, I think, is trust. One of the biggest challenges we face as a country, face as a planet, is a deep, deep erosion in trust. And there is so much distrust. Nobody trusts anybody on anything. And they all talk about transparency and more information. I think the desire for transparency is nothing but a proxy for trust. How much information can anyone handle? I mean, at my job, people want data. Nobody looks at it, but they just want more information. That's because they don't trust me. They don't trust the person who's the leader, right? So we have a massive crisis as a planet in terms of trust. And one antidote to trust, I think, is caring, nurturing a culture through change management. When things are in flux, need a steady hand, but a person who truly brings compassion and caring and fosters a culture and a community where people feel safe and included. Thanks.
Okay, same question. I did want to say, talking about the first two questions, that I forgot to say that I was thrilled that Marilyn Strickland wore the humbook when she was sworn in. I think it's wonderful to see cultural representation in American settings because we are such, it is so representative of the people who live here and give back to our community. In terms of advancing leaders through innovation, I guess I'm going to speak a little bit about my role in the community college because here in Brighton, I feel that we have expectations around our children, our students, to be leaders, to advance academically, to really be competitive and as Asian Americans, as most of you may know, the expectations of us as Asian Americans is that we will excel academically and perhaps financially. And I do want to say that I've only had this doctor title for 2 weeks. So it's actually like a long road to get here. But at the community college, you know, one of the things that I discovered in my research is that half of Asian American students in the United States start at the community college. And we don't think about them as really having a trajectory from the community college. And, you know, taking care of all the students at MCC, I sometimes find that they have internalized this idea that they cannot be leaders, that they cannot succeed because they've had to work perhaps a little bit harder to get that seat at school or have a seat at the table eventually, but that it is there, that they are leaders and that systems have not been built for them to actually get through bureaucracy perhaps, to get what they need to actually succeed in school and perhaps in life. So I guess when I think about innovation and leadership is how can we change the mindset of who and what a leader really looks like? I feel that all of the students that I see at MCC are leaders. You know, it's just tapping the right discussion or conversation or interaction with them for them to see it themselves, because it's not something that people can impose on you, but it's really something that you need to internalize and feel the trust in yourself that you can perhaps have a voice that's important for others to hear. And I hope we do that well at MCC. I think, you know, we try. We have a very small community of Asian American students at MCC. It's only 6% of our total student population, but it's been growing pretty quickly. And we know here in the upstate area, we are a sanctuary city, so a lot of refugees come to this area. The growth in New York State is the fastest growing here in the upstate area for Asian Americans. So we have a lot of potential to encourage and support young people to become leaders in our community, especially Asian Americans here in Brighton and in Rochester, I hope the county. But I guess, you know, last week we were in Albany with Senator Cooney and on a panel on upstate, on thinking about upstate, Asian Americans in upstate New York. And really, I think the thing that I came out of the session thinking is that because as upstaters, we are sort of, in terms of population, we're not as dense, perhaps, as a larger city. So there could be more systems in place to support one another and support our young people as they come up through different educational opportunities and work opportunities. If college is not the path for them, perhaps other opportunities that they can see themselves as leaders outside of the college path, I think, is also really important. I think they are also leaders in our community, and we don't always see it that way. So I'll just leave it at that. Are we taking questions today or no?
Just from me.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll just add, I mean, these are much more brilliant answers than I'm able to come up with. But, you know, the thing that, I guess Dr. King kind of looms large over this conversation. And I'm reminded of something he said where, you know, when you climb the ladder, make sure you don't pull that ladder up. Put it back down again. I think once we have Asian Americans in leadership positions, and you know, as Dr. David has said, you know, Asian Americans have been very successful in certain arenas, a lot of arenas, more arenas as time goes on, certainly medicine, academia, and business. I think, you know, it behooves our Asian American leaders and all leaders to give other opportunities to people who may not have a seat at the table. I think you have an obligation to do so, both for the quality of your organization, the quality of your country, the quality of your business, but as a moral obligation. You know, we are all connected. The opportunities that an individual attains to, or has to attain a high position have come from his own efforts, but also from the help of others. And if we don't have individuals who are willing to advance those who may not have an easy access to the table. Maybe they come from a lower income. Maybe they have challenges, familial or personal, or maybe they struggle with the language, or maybe they're shy because they don't have a full command of the English language or their accent. I think that's something that we as Asian Americans or leaders of any sort have an obligation to help. And I think the Army has always been kind of a leader in this cause. I mean, people are critical of the armed forces in some ways, but they've always been on the cutting edge of promoting leaders. And when they integrated the Army, they were one of the first large institutions to integrate. It's because they saw the value, the efficacy of doing so. So, you know, innovation can come from institutions as stodgy as our military. And I think it's important if you want to consider how can these organizations be the most successful. Having diverse leadership assists in that regard. Yeah, so I think that if we want to maximize the opportunities for our community, Asian American or otherwise, we have to see a diverse leadership branch, and then we have to extend that branch down to others when it's their opportunity to serve.
We're not entertaining questions from the audience? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Senator Cooney is here.
Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Miriam, since
Wow, what a stellar panel. Thank you so very much. Thank you. You know, the senator is here, but I'd quickly like to say a few words, and then we will allow the senator to close us out. The term cultural humility has been a recent topic of discussion among the Town of Brighton's Idea Board. One might describe cultural humility as more than a concept. Cultural humility is a communal reflection to analyze the root causes of suffering among a population and create a broader, more inclusive view of the world. Cultural humility is a daily practice for people to deal with the hierarchy of relationships, changing organizational policy, and building relationships. It is our hope that this evening's presentation of the Town of Brighton's inaugural celebration of AANHPI Heritage Month will allow you to absorb some of the history and lived realities of our neighbors, friends, and peers. Thank you again to our panelists, Dr. David, Dr. Lee, Judge Vilkew. Moderator Amy Shee. Performers from the ABCD Dance Company. Thank you, Councilmember Wilt, for being here with us this evening. Thank you. And members of the town's Idea Board. Senator Cooney, we'll have you now. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Oh, it's okay. Take your time. We've been waiting all night for you.
I know it's warm and it's in the evening, but I wanted to make sure that I stopped by to say hello and thank you to the Town of Brighton. Thank you, Marion, and all of the Idea Board and the supervisor and town board member for organizing today. Dr. Lee, I love saying that. Dr. Lee, you hit the ball out of the park when you said visibility is one of our opportunities moving forward as an Asian American community. We're here, we've been here, we're contributing, but we're not often seen, understood, recognized, or celebrated. That's changing with this amazing panel of leaders that we have. But I do think it's worthy to note that across Monroe County, across upstate New York, we're one of the few events having these dialogues, engaging with our community around the Asian American experience in 2024 in New York. We had a summit, a statewide summit last week in Albany. About 400 folks from across the state came to Albany to talk about some of these issues. It's the first one we've ever had in New York State. And the year before that was the first summit in upstate New York, right? So this is new. We're just starting to have these conversations. But the lived experiences of families that have been here for a generation or two needs to be celebrated and talked about. It needs to be talked about in our school systems, needs to be talked about in our places of work, needs to be talked about in our places of government, and needs to be celebrated in our communities, large and small. I will tell you, it takes a special responsibility, and I really respect Judge Vilku for leading the way here in Brighton. But it takes a responsibility of all of us to make sure that opportunities, whether in public service or in employment opportunities or educational opportunities, are shared, right? So we need to be celebrating and uplifting one another and to be making sure that everyone has the same opportunities in this great town and, of course, in our great community of Rochester. So thank you for having me. Thank you for being here today. And please don't let this just be a photo or a one-off experience. Please go back into our community and celebrate Asian Americans for the rest of the month of May and beyond. Thank you very much.
Miriam, do you want a picture? Do you want a picture together, Miriam, with the senator and the IDEA committee? I'm playing my role as coordinator now.
Thank you for coordinating.
Thank you, that was great.
It was nice to meet you. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is the
Thank you so much for interpreting. I know it's